our time to get to the truth, why. So I took a long time. I went through a lot of plays, and I didn't feel like we played complementary football. I said that felt in disarray. Just a week
Oh.
ago, I loved how we finished a 2 minute at the end of the half and a four
All right,
minute to
you can
finish the
bail. You
game.
can bail. I
And
just
this,
wanted to hear him say, I said that felt in disarray. Um, I had not heard the question going into it. That was perfectly summarized in terms of what a disaster Saturday was. Yesterday was Dan Quinn's Tell the Truth Monday. You know, he has that Tell the Truth Monday day during the regular season. He has implemented Tell the Truth Mondays during the preseason after he felt like his team was in disarray on Saturday. Good morning, everybody. I made a list. By the way, the team released Will Harris today, one of the big free agent signings last year. I remember when he got hurt early in the season. Oh, my God, what are we going to do? Our best communicator. Yeah, he's gone. That means Quan Martin's going to make the team. And probably came down to the two of them. I made a list of the most popular, narratives, even kind of predictions coming out of preseason and training camp last year. The things that, local media, national media, fans seemed pretty confident about. Not everybody was on the same page, but these were themes coming out of camp and preseason heading into the 2025 season last year. And then I did the same thing for this summer. So far, we still have another week and a half until we are ready for a regular season game. But because I'm going to ask you guys, of the narratives that have sort of built here during this offseason and this training camp and this preseason, which are going to come true versus those that are not? Because last year, per usual, this is the case pretty much every year. This is why I say you just can't believe, what you're hearing or seeing during this time of the season, which is really fake part of the season for us anyway, because 50% of it's not only going to be wrong, it's going to be dead wrong. And then some of it's going to be right, and some of it's going to be, kind of, close to right, close to wrong. I came up with 5 things that were big narratives, or even predictions from last year. Number 1 was there were some in national media, for sure, and even some locally, and even some of you, that thought that the team and Jaden Daniels specifically couldn't match what they did in 2024. One particular narrative was consistent, though, and that was even if the team, statistically and record-wise, takes a step back, and there were many predicting that last year, and by the way, they were right, probably for the wrong reasons. They didn't predict, the wrath of injuries that plagued last season as the primary reason. But most people were pretty consistent in that Jaden Daniels was the real deal. And his second season with a year under his belt and another weapon in the mix, Deebo Samuel, and the addition of 2 tackles, a star left tackle in Laramie Tunsil, and a rookie first-round selection in Connerly Jr., that Jaden was going to continue to grow and just become, the monster that he was in 2024. Some people said, again, that maybe it won't look statistically like it did a year ago and record-wise what it looked like a year ago because they really hit, everybody talked about the incredible good fortune they had in 2025. But everybody believed he was legit. He'll continue to prove it and show it in 2025. That was one of the major kind of going into 2025, coming off the summer of training camp and preseason that we had last year. Another one was, and by the way, obviously everybody was, with respect to the kind of season he might have in year 2, they were wrong, but again, not for the reasons. He didn't play football in 2025. He played in 7 games, only played 4 start to finish. The other major, pretty much everybody in agreement, narrative that came out of preseason and training camp last year was just how much better the defense was going to be in 2025. Much improved. It looked it in camp. The communication on the field was right. Will Harris really has everything on the back end, buttoned up. Trey Amos looks like the real deal as a rookie. Sandra Still's coming off that great rookie season. Luvu coming off that all-pro breakout season. This is going to be a much improved defense. Major popular theme coming out of preseason and training camp last year heading into the regular season. I'll add to that, the secondary specifically, people thought was going to be the strongest, unit on the team after the quarterback room. Some were actually saying this might be one of the better secondaries in the league. Yes, that was one of the popular narratives. The defense was really a big, popular, everybody's in on, this defense is not going to be what it was in 2024. The next one I wrote down, the Terry situation was going to hurt the team, was going to hurt the offense, was going to really, many people predicted injury, because soft tissue injuries happen when you miss that much camp. The Terry situation, the contract, hold in, the, confrontational nature of it, hurt feelings, certainly on his side. And that was certainly a narrative that was coming out of this summer and into the regular season. And then, overall, and I've kind of already mentioned this, but most people nationally were predicting a step-back season for Washington. They're like, okay, 12-5, 2 playoff wins. Yes, he is great. The quarterback, no question, is great. But can they really do that again against a tougher schedule? Yada, yada, yada. So coming, those were, I don't think I missed any. I may have missed one or two. I remember there was a lot of optimism about the kicking situation being improved with Matt Gay, dicing and slicing up the preseason and, in practice. And then ultimately he didn't even make it the entire year. But, the Jaden Daniels theme, that was a big one. Bottom line is it was kind of wrong, but not necessarily wrong long-term. The defense was majorly wrong. That was just a massive whiff by everybody that predicted that the defense was going to be much improved last year. Sure, the defense had major injuries as well. It did. Essentially their 3 top pass rushers, Armstrong, and their 3 defensive ends, top 3, or Armstrong, Wise, John Baptiste, all lost for the season. But the defense was never going to be good if everybody had been healthy. It wasn't well coached. It was in disarray much of the time. The Tell the Truth Mondays on the defense each week was, oh my God, it's bad and it's getting worse. The secondary in particular, what a disaster. People were predicting it to be the strongest part of the team coming out of last summer, other than the quarterback room. The Terry situation, spot on. It definitely hurt. He got hurt. There wasn't any depth. They didn't plan for no Terry or injuries. They didn't have a plan. Ben talked about that all during the summer last year. Man, there's just no depth at wide receiver. Hopefully Terry comes back, doesn't get injured. They pick up where they left off. Debo's, good. Noah Brown's good. No, it was a disaster at wide receiver. And the Terry situation, people were dead on right about that one, that it ended up affecting the offense. And then ultimately, those that thought last year would be a step-back season were correct. Now, we'll never know, had all of their best players that didn't play the majority of the season, had they played the majority of the season, what it would have looked like. I would still say that even if they had been a relatively healthy football team, like an average health situation rather than the worst in the league last year based on the starters in week 1, I still think it would have been a tough grind because the defense was just so god-awful. And so to, muscle 9 wins out of last year with that defense, that would have been, I think, a best case. Best case, had everybody stayed healthy. All right, so that was kind of last year. Now let's look at this year. What are the major kind of storylines and narratives and even predictions going into 2026. Because what I want to know from you at 301-230-0980 is which ones are going to be proven right and which ones are going to be proven wrong. It's not easy because I think last year, pretty much everybody, I mean, I even said, I think the defense is a mystery. I don't know what we're going to get, but there's no chance it can be worse than it was in 2024. And I was wrong about that. I'm kind of saying the same thing about this year. Like, there's no way it can be worse than it was in 2025. I guess it could be, but 2025 was so much worse than 2024. It'd be legitimately difficult to be as inept as they were defensively last year. Here were kind of the list of popular narratives right now coming out of this offseason training camp and the 2 preseason games that they played. I think number one is the Jaden Daniels, can he stay healthy narrative. You know, that's more of a question than a prediction, but it is a major narrative. Many predicting and feeling, and I think it's a recency bias, kind of a hunch, but many people believing that, you know, he's just going to be one of those guys that is perpetually hurt and unavailable. That is a major, major theme. Can Jaden stay healthy in 2026? And a lot of people believe that that is not necessarily the answer to that is no. Obviously, with this team, especially over the last couple of weeks, the center's been a conversation all offseason, and now it's become even more of a conversation. But the offensive line now is in trouble. That is a narrative right now, a prediction. The O-line is in deep, deep trouble, and that is going to wreck any sort of offensive productivity or offensive upside that they might have with Jaden, Terry, Diggs, Okonkwo, etc. The O-line is a mess. They didn't address center properly, and then they lost their best offensive lineman, Tunsil, to which more likely than not is a season-ending injury. It'll certainly be most of the season. So a major narrative heading into the season is the offensive line in Washington is an absolute mess. Now, and the center position specifically is a mess. PFF had Washington 32nd. The thing that we read the other day, I'm forgetting what it was, that ranked the units was 31st. Was it
ESPN?
Who was it?
It was the ESPN ranking.
Yeah, I know, but who was it? It was
I think it was a
Seth
like,
Walder.
I think he wrote it, but it was a consensus group of people.
Yeah, and it was like 31st, I think. And then, by the way, coming back to the defense for a second consecutive year, a major popular thought and prediction is that the defense is going to be much improved. You know, they added 10, 11 new players to the defense. Even if they didn't add a superstar defensively, they have so many bodies to choose from, and there's no more Joe Witt Jr. They have to be better. It's a Brian Flores scheme. They're going to be aggressive. There's no possible way they could finish next to last in takeaways with 10 total. That's what they had last year. Only the Jets had fewer with 4. Those are the top 3 for me. I mean, there are some others, you know, did they get the, you know, but not major popular narratives. Am I missing one? I don't think I'm missing one. The wide receiver question was obviously a major spring into early summer question, but they answered that by adding Diggs. Now, when I say they answered that, they improved the situation to a level that they're not, you know, majorly in trouble at wide receiver. In fact, the position right now may be the hardest to cut down to 7 or 8 on Sunday by 6 o'clock. Did I miss any? I think it's, can Jaden stay healthy? The offensive line's going to be a mess. The defense is going to be much improved. Those are the 3 things. And the Jaden thing is more of a question, but I think a lot of people are leaning, you know, more on the, I'm concerned about him staying healthy. Well, I'll believe it when I see it.
I think there's one that's kind of carrying over from last season that wasn't as much of a conversation to start camp as it is now. All these injuries that are popping up in training camp. Now, I understand that training camp injuries are a part of football, but at the same time, when you look at last year, correlate it with this year, a lot of guys are dropping like flies in these preseason games and in just practice in general. So I think that's starting to kind of get kicked up in conversation
that?
too.
That the team is just injury prone, and that
Yeah, part of it.
We're on the verge of another injury plagued season.
It's setting up to sound that way.
That. I mean, I know what you're saying. I think it's a normal amount. Look, the Tunsil injury right now is one of the most serious injuries so far in preseason, in training camp. Is there an injury that's more of a blow than Tunsil being lost for, call it 4/5 of the season at minimum? Nobody's
Tunsil,
lost a quarterback.
Allegretti.
No, I'm talking about league wide.
Oh, league wide.
League wide. Wow. Is there a bigger injury than the Tunsil injury so far? There hasn't been a major quarterback injury, correct?
Not yet. Fingers crossed.
I mean, is Tua banged up? I mean, that's not really.
I think he just stinks. That's more.
Well, there's that too. All right. So what I want to know at 301-230-0980. Let's take the three that I gave out, and if you've got another one, that's fine too. Will Jaden stay healthy in 2026? The offensive line's going to be a mess. Will that hold up or not? The defense is going to be much improved. Will that prove to be accurate or not? Last summer, out of the 5 that I wrote down, basically 3 were dead wrong. Dead wrong. The defense much improved. The secondary in particular, the strongest part of the team. I had basically 4 because 1 and 5 were the same. So 2 out of the 4 were dead wrong. The Terry situation, no doubt, was right. The wide receiver concern going into last year proved out to be right. There were other, kind of one-offs. Like everybody said during camp, Tunsil looks like a monster. Proved out to be right. They also said Matt Gay was going to be a really solid kicker. Turned out to be dead wrong. I want to know what you think is going to hold up. And I'll tell you right now, to me, the O-line is a major question. I'll give you my answers to this when we come back. But 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Of the current, predictions / themes heading into the season, Jaden staying healthy, the offensive line question, the center question specifically, defense looks to be really improved. Which do you think will hold up as accurate and which will prove to be false? 301-230-0980. Liam Griffin from the Washington Times will join us at 11:35. Team, remember, has the joint practice with the Ravens tomorrow, and then the preseason game with the Ravens on Friday, and that'll do it. And then the cut-down date is Sunday. They've got to be down to 53 by Sunday. Cutting Will Harris today, which is the move they made. There were a couple of other, hold on, let me just read from their press statement. They added 3 players, an outside linebacker, Boogie Basham, a safety, Josh Bledsoe, another safety, Quindell Johnson. They added those 3 players as free agents. They cut Will Harris and safety Malik Spencer, and they put on the injured list linebacker Drake Jackson, who was a 49er selection and was hurt there and lost a couple of years. And they actually think he's got talent, but he just can't stay healthy. But big news in that Will Harris has been released, probably giving him some time to catch on with somebody else between now and cut-down date, and perhaps even playing a preseason game this coming weekend with somebody else. And that does mean that Quan Martin, more likely than not now, will make the football team, you would think. All right, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Which of the 3 kind of themes coming out of this summer will hold up? Jaden Daniels' concern over his injuries. Will that be a thing or not? The offensive line is going to be a mess. Do you think that'll hold up as true or not? And then the defense clearly going to be much better than it was last year. Will that be true or not? 301-230-0980, Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. Don't forget, you can watch this program on our Team 980 YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there. So yesterday we talked about the Harrison Butker 69-yard field goal in the preseason game for the Chiefs against the Buccaneers, and how, kicking field goals has never been easier. And I mentioned that one of the major reasons for the unbelievable growth in made 55-plus yarders and made 60-plus yarders in 2025 was because of what the kickers were able to do with the footballs. They were now getting 60 footballs before the season began to break them in however they wanted, when the old rule was they got them 60 to 90 minutes before the game itself, so they didn't have as much time to do with it what they wanted to do. Lawrence Tynes, didn't he get in trouble for something? The kicker, the old Giants kicker? I think he was involved with something. Anyway, Lawrence Tynes tweeted out the following yesterday. Got to go back to the kicking balls on game day. It will instantly change the kicking game. So he's saying you can't give, and he goes on to say NFL teams have 50-plus kicking balls for the season in their possession all season long, so kickers and punters can do what they want to them during the weeks of the season. He said, our sweet spot on the ball used to be the size of a golf ball. It is now softball size, and I'm not being hyperbolic. I love seeing the big ball, but kicking field goals in the NFL has never been easier. Yeah, I think they've got to do that, man. I think they've got to change the rule. They've got to give these kickers the 60 to 90 minutes, not the weeks in advance, to get the football to where they want to get the football. I mean, it's too easy to kick field goals now. It's too easy for the offense. I was wrong about something yesterday. I said that the average starting field position number was the 33-yard line. It was actually the 31 and a half with the new kickoff rule. But still, you're talking about 2 first downs, and if you have one first down with a big play involved, you're in field goal range for a lot of these kickers. I think the offense has to earn it a bit more. I don't like it. All right, that's my what do you got? Lawrence Tynes helping out the cause. Former kicker. What did he do? Was it sexual harassment?
No, that's not. He was not nearly the worst Giants kicker to have some legal trouble.
Did I get him confused with somebody else?
Yeah, I forget his name, but I know what Giants kicker you're talking about, the one who may or may not have hit his wife. But on August 17, 2005, Tynes turned himself into Pierce County, Wisconsin jail after punching a bar patron and breaking a bouncer's nose in a bar fight the previous weekend.
Okay. Yeah, that's much less than what I thought.
Yeah.
Bar fight, I thought there was something much worse. All right, let's get back to the question of the day. The question is, I jotted down some of the major popular themes coming out of training camp and preseason last year, and then jotted down a few of them that I think are going to be the major themes coming out of training camp and preseason this year. And I want to know which ones for this year will hold up versus those that won't. Last year, there was, a belief that Jaden was going to, continue to be turn into a monster, even if the team took a step back. I remember saying the same thing going into last year. I'm like, look, he's the real deal. He's not. He's going to continue to get better. The issue is whether or not, the defense steps it up and whether or not the schedule plays into it. And they could end up being 10-7 instead of 12-5, but be a really good football team again. No, I didn't predict 10-7. I predicted 13-4, I think. I forget what my prediction was last year. And then another theme last year, the defense was going to be much improved with the additions they made, and with Sandra Still and Trey Amos and Luvu and Bobby and the whole group. The secondary specifically, God, I found these tweets when we started training camp a few weeks ago with people, that were out there play-by-play tweeting from training camp practices talking about, oh, my God, the secondary, wow. Amos, Sandra Still, Will Harris edition. This is going to be the strongest part of the team other than the quarterback room. I mean, could anything have been further from the truth when the real games began? But people were right about the Terry situation. Ultimately, it really impacted the season. Now, it impacted the season more that Terry, when he was on the field, wasn't out there with his starting quarterback. That probably was a major factor in Terry's situation. But there's no doubt that him holding out and the hurt feelings associated with what turned out to be a very, not a pleasant contract holdout, hold-in situation. And the bottom line is the offense never was in sync, even though obviously the best players weren't on the field very much. So for this year, Jaden staying healthy. A lot of people very concerned about his ability to stay healthy in 2026. Are they going to be right or are they going to be wrong? The offensive line's a mess, with the center position in particular being very much mismanaged by the front office. Is that going to be true? Are we going to get to the regular season and find out, oh my God, they don't have a center, their offensive line is in total disarray? Clearly, they weren't predicting and weren't counting on Laramie Tunsil, their best offensive lineman, not playing. That's a big part of why the O-line looks less than what it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. But that's now a major theme. And of course, once again, for a second straight year, people are very bullish, very optimistic about the defense being much improved. So 301-230-0980. Look, for me, there's nothing on the Jaden injury concern front that I'm buying into. And the reason is I've got numbers to back me up. Until last year, he was a healthy quarterback as a college quarterback in 2 different places where he started 52 of a possible 54 games. And as a rookie in the NFL, yes, there were nicks and knacks, including a rib injury, but he played in all 20 football games for Washington. There's 17 in the regular season, and they're 3 playoff games. I think last year was the aberration, and he will be healthy in 2026. And when I say healthy, I'm not saying that he's not going to have a banged up, something that might cost him, a half or even a game. But it's not going to be last year where he had several injuries that basically cost him the entirety of the season. 13 of the 17 games he did not play in start to finish. 10 games he didn't play in at all. 13 he didn't play in start to finish. And that was not, a season that can even be evaluated. So on that front, I feel like the naysayers, those that are concerned, are going to be wrong. On the offensive line, specifically the center position, I would like to say that what we've seen so far isn't really isn't necessarily indicative of what we're going to see when the regular season begins, because there's no game planning, because the actual starting center hasn't played yet, Nick Allegretti. But I am concerned about the offensive line in general. I think that when you take off of your offensive line one of the 2 or 3 best pass blocking left tackles in the game, one of the best 5 or 6 overall left tackles in the game, there's no way you're not going to feel that. There's just no way. You have to accommodate now for that position not being what it was, which means now we got to look over and wonder whether or not Brandon Coleman, whomever he's going to be lining up against, needs help or doesn't need help. With Laramie, it's like, we're good. We just have to focus on the other 4 offensive line positions. And then the center is obviously a concern. And it's a concern right now because Nick Allegretti, who I do believe they think was going to be every bit of Tyler Biotish, if not more, and I have nothing to say that they're wrong about that. We haven't seen it yet, but I'm concerned about multiple injuries with a guy who's been around for a while now and what appears to be legitimately no quality NFL depth at the position. That could change. A week from now, that might be completely different based on players getting waived and being available. But as of now, those that are really concerned about the offensive line, I am concerned about the offensive line. Now, would I be shocked if the scheme and the game planning covers up for some of the flaws and it's not as disastrous as it would be if you're just lining up and player evaluating like they do in the preseason, no, I wouldn't be shocked at all. Do I think it's going to be a top-tier offensive line? No, that seems like a long shot at this point. And then with respect to the theme and the prediction that the defense is going to be much improved, I'll just say what I've said all along during the summer. There's no way it can be worse. No way it can be worse than last year. Last year was, certainly in part due to the lost players. But for the most part, it was just a bad defense. It was a defense, as Quinn talked about the game on Saturday, that was constantly in disarray. The communication was bad. The organization was poor. And then they made up for it by tackling poorly and not creating any turnovers. I mean, it was the worst defensive season in my lifetime of watching my football team. Last year was. I don't think I've ever seen a worse defense over the last half of the season in this town than the 2025 Washington defense, especially after week 7 when they lost Dorrance Armstrong. It was over. They had no shot. I mean, I still go back to that Detroit game. I just can't believe an NFL team had 9 drives, scored on the first 8, and ran out the clock on the 9th, and never was stressed, not once. It was one of the most embarrassing displays of defense I've ever seen. And it's not like, the Dallas game on the road or the Minnesota game on the road was much better. I mean, that defense made J.J. McCarthy look like Joe Montana, and he stinks right now. I mean, there might be a future for him. Who knows? I mean, he was bad last year, and his best pro game of his career was against Washington's defense last year. He led a 19-play, 98-yard drive that took like 11 minutes against our defense. It's got to be improved. Now, is it going to be much improved? I'm going to go with yes. But this is one of those where when we're doing this next summer, I don't want to look back and say, remember how optimistic everybody was about the defense being much improved? It was barely improved. They finished 27th in takeaways. They were 26th on third down. That would be an improvement from last year, but I got to think that it's going to be closer to much improved than just barely improved. Max, Jaden staying healthy, the people that are concerned about that, are they going to be right or wrong?
See, and this is the big problem. I don't want to say that they're going to be right, but there's always a chance that they could be right. Now, Jaden has never really made an effort to protect himself. Now, I'm hoping that really takes shape into this year. But given the body of work so far over 2 seasons,
you're concerned. You think they're going to be right?
Yeah, I'm concerned.
Okay. What about the offensive line, the center position specifically? Is everybody going to be right that it's shaping up to be a disaster?
It could be. It depends on how Matt Gulbin plays.
I need a prediction from you. Are they going to be right or wrong?
I think they're going to be right. I think Matt Gulbin and Julian Good-Jones are not going to be enough, especially if Nick
defense is going to be much improved. Are people going to be right about that or wrong about that?
I think people are going to be right about that as well. I think Durante Jones coming into this new system with Sonny Styles will be getting a lot of crap for what he's been putting on tape in the run game. But if you've been watching his coverage snaps, he's incredible, especially compared to what we got in Bobby Wagner last year. So,
all right, let's go to Peter on line 1. Peter, go ahead.
Hey, first off, I think the defense, and I predict it will be better. No doubt about that. And I think it's going to be a lot better. Secondly, the offensive line, I think it's going to be okay. I predict they're going to be better and they're going to be okay. The third thing with Jaden, the same thing. I think he'll be better and he won't get hurt this year. I just think he will be. He'll be all right. I predict that. The thing that I'm worried about is the change from the offensive coordinators. Originally, I thought it might be a good thing, but it kind of concerns me him getting under center and not having Kingsbury do what he does. So that because Jaden was so dynamic in that offense in 2024, nobody could stop them, and so Cliffberry's now with the Rams, so what's that say?
I like what you just said, Peter. I think you just added another kind of – it's not a major narrative, but there are a lot of people a lot of people that believe, thank God Cliff is gone, and there may be some, questions about David Blau, but there are a lot of people that have bought into, yeah, the Cliff offense was not a good offense for Jaden or anybody else. So I'm not so sure about that. I'm with you. I'm not so sure about that. Now, I do think a more of a Shanahan style, McVay style, even a Ben Johnson infused into that mix is probably a great fit for Jaden too, and that he will excel. I think he'd excel in almost any offense, but he was outstanding in that offense as a rookie. And the truth is, the offense last year, even with the decimated, injury results during the course of the year, they were much better than the defense was. Much better. They were middle of the pack in most of the advanced numbers in the league. Most people in the league think Cliff knows what he's doing. Whether or not it's what they would want for their offense, that's another question. But I think that's an interesting thing to introduce into, the narratives is that, Cliff's gone, that's a good thing. That is a narrative. Don't you think, Max? That's a narrative that the majority think Cliff's gone is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I just think that Jaden being under center is going to help him a little bit more, especially, and it's going to help the run game too. Like, that's going to be a big thing because that was a big narrative last year, is not being able to run the ball when you needed to run the ball.
Yeah. I always find the running the ball thing to be so interesting. I know we've done this a million times, but Washington finished as the 4th best rush offense in the NFL, and Jaden barely played. So it wasn't like the quarterback was a big part of it. Rushing attempts, people said, Washington didn't rush the ball enough. They were 9th in actual rushing attempts last year. Average yards per carry last year, 4.7 for Washington, 5th in the league. Like I kind of agree that it never felt like it was as much of an emphasis as it should have been. And there's probably a lot of nuance and context around this. But the actual hard numbers suggest that anybody that says Washington didn't try to run the football and couldn't run the football are dead wrong. This was not a quarterback-led rushing offense last year. Understood why they were top 3 in the NFL in 2024. Jaden was a big part of the rushing attack, but not last year. Krosky Merritt had 800-plus yards. Rodriguez had 500 yards. Yes, Mariota had close to 300, but that's not what Jaden had in his rookie year. McNichols had 200 and something yards. Who am I forgetting in the backfield last year?
Bill.
No, he led the team in rushing with over 800 yards. Yeah. I just think that's one of those things that, like, everybody just hears it and they're like, yeah, that's true. Yeah, they didn't try to run the football and they couldn't run the football.
Because they were plenty
4th in rushing yards and they were 9th in rushing attempts.
There were plenty of situations last year where they were near the goal line or just needed a few yards, and we were all screaming, Cliff, run the ball,
yes.
And it didn't happen.
You're right. Stan, go ahead.
Kevin. I chose the center position and not the offensive line overall, but I think it ties into number one because, if our offensive line is bad, worst case scenario, and it's looking not great right now, then that will eventually affect Jaden. I know you mentioned that he hasn't had an injury history, but, if your line is really bad and, like the pundits have said, this is one of the worst offensive lines right now, he's going to get hurt no matter his injury history or not. So that's what concerns me right now greatly. And I don't know what they'll do to improve it. Hopefully they'll remedy that before the season starts. But, it's not a good feeling, especially when you see the first 3 teams that they're facing. That's definitely going to be an issue. One thing, though, I think that you didn't mention in your themes that could be a theme is, obviously the coach and the GM. I think, nationally, I watch a lot of national shows, and, I don't think the feelings are too high right now on Dan Quinn. So if the season does go sideways, or if they start 0-3, or, let's say they get off to a bad start, I think his seat's definitely going to be on fire. So that's definitely a theme that I think could, pick up the pace, as we go along here. I think, and also, him calling that practice yesterday, I think even he feels that, the pressure's kind of on him. So, that could easily be a theme or, a theme that dominates nationally, as the season goes on and if it's a worst case scenario.
You know what? Two things from your call. I'm going to come back to the Quinn thing in a second. Your first thing, you're right. They do tie together. There's no doubt. Now, this is where Blau comes in because really good OCs can, mask, cover up some of those, protection issues and flaws. But last year, as an example, in LA, Justin Herbert had an offensive line that was in total disarray. They lost Rashawn Slater, the left tackle, in preseason. Alt was hurt. They had injuries throughout the season. He was the third most sacked quarterback in the league, and he played at nowhere near 100%. Especially, you could see it coming down the stretch last year. He was definitely banged up throughout the year, and it was really the offensive line's issue. Now, with respect to Quinn, I had no idea. Do you know what Quinn's odds are right now to be the first coach fired in the NFL this year?
Isn't he like the favorite?
He wasn't 2 months ago. He is now. He is the favorite right now to be the first NFL coach fired. Wow. Because when we looked at this, I don't know, after the draft, maybe the last time, I haven't really checked this out in a while. He was not in the top 5 or 6. Guys like Sirianni and Bowles and Aaron Glenn, they were leading the pack on that. Quinn right now let me just give you it's close. Okay, Aaron Glenn, Bowles, and Quinn are basically kind of co-favorites right now to be the first. If you blend all these together, they're all right around between 3-1 and 4-1 to be the first coach fired.
And Bowles got a big vote of confidence from Vita Vea when he made that when he re-signed.
Yeah. Bowles is very, very good as a defensive guy, and players really respect Bowles. He's just one of those people. I mean, it's because he was an ex-Redskin, obviously, and a championship Redskin safety. I've just always rooted for Bowles, but I did not realize that Quinn was way up on that list. All right, Skip, Billy, Mark, Ian, Joe, stay on hold. If you want to weigh in, the question is, of the themes that have come out of preseason games, training camp, which ones are going to be true? Which ones aren't going to be true? The concern over Jaden staying healthy. Are those people that are incredibly concerned about that, are they going to be right or wrong? The O-line now looks like it could be an absolute problem for this team. Are those people that say that going to be right or wrong? The defense clearly is going to be much improved, right or wrong. 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Three, two, one. Can you turn down programming? Sorry. 3. The Big Ten is going to pass a rule today that will not allow players to return from the NFL and play for one of its schools. ESPN's Pete Thamel is reporting. The SEC could do that. It might be too late. Daquan Wright is already at LSU, and now New Orleans' Xavier Harris is going to join Lane Kiffin's roster at LSU as well. This is one of those issues, and we can talk about this later in the show in more detail, because I do think it's interesting, and I think some of you that might not even be college football fans are interested in it. I'm telling you, as a massive college football fan, when the games start, and they start this Saturday, but when they start in earnest next weekend, I just don't think many people care once the games begin. I also think that this may be a one-year kind of a thing. It doesn't mean something else won't pop up down the road, but this was one of those stays, court rulings that applies to really only 30 players in total, and we might not see something like this again. But, man, college sports, different. I mean, the guy's going back to college where he can make a lot more money than he can in the NFL. Somebody sent me an email and said, what's wrong with the NFL union whereby a player can leave the NFL and go back to college and make more money? Well, my answer to him was the revenue generation from that player being at LSU is greater than that player being on the practice squad or being, number 50 on the roster in the NFL. It's a return on investment thing as much as it is anything else. I mean, at this point, they're all players getting paid with contracts. Who cares if they're 18 and in college or 21 in college or 32 in the NFL? Free market. Skip, answer the question about the themes going into this season. Many people concerned about Jaden staying healthy. Will they be right or wrong? The offensive line is going to be a mess, especially at center. Will they be right or wrong? The defense is going to be much improved. Will they turn out to be right or wrong? What do you say?
So, Kevin, I agree with the previous caller who said the first two are related. Yeah. And I think because of that, Blau is not going to open things up in the beginning. He's going to try to protect our number one asset, do a lot of 12 personnel, and maybe, like you said, I totally agree with you that they are capable of running the ball. This offensive line, even as currently constructed.
Well, I didn't say they were capable of running the ball or not. I'm not so sure yet. We'll see.
Okay, but they did last year.
Yeah,
right?
Well, yeah. I've pointed out several times this idea that they couldn't run the football and they didn't try to run the football under Cliff. The numbers actually say the opposite. But at the same time, my feeling watching the team last year is I would like to see him run the football more. Like, I go back to the Green Bay game when they could not handle anybody up front. And it was a total jailbreak on every drop back. And I'm like, maybe we, go 2-3 tight ends, although Bates got hurt in that game, and try to run the football. But anyway, continue.
So I'm relying on the defense being much better, okay? And because the first three games, we're going to be underdogs in each game. I mean, we can go 0-3. We can play well and still go 0-3 in those games. So we're up against it, and the defense has to hold up. And I'm looking at, the preseason is total garbage. I don't know what the defense is really going to be. I hear Kine and other people saying, well, it looks good in practice and the scrimmages, but who knows? And then all this, hate against our number one draft pick, which I agree with you, I don't understand. However, I am looking at Caleb Downs and Reuben Bain, and nothing but positive
things. It's preseason,
things
Skip. You've already discounted whatever you're going to say about Bain and Downs and other places. And look, I would have taken Bain. I think Bain and the reaction when he fell to where he fell to, I think he's going to wreck the NFL, personally. He was the best college football player in America, not named Mendoza, last year. And so I would have taken him, but I also liked Styles and I liked Downs. There were, a number of players that I thought, made sense there. Although if Carnell Tate had fallen, I think that's who they would have taken. But go ahead.
So it does come down to Adam Peters being right in his selections, and I think he will. I think the pass rush is going to be much improved if everybody stays healthy. And if Styles and the other linebackers are good, if they just hold their own and get a good defensive line push, and then we got the defensive backfield. That is a question mark. But like you said, I'm with you. It has to be better than last year, and we're going to need it to be better than last year in order to even have a season.
Yeah, the thing about this defense going into this year, for me, is you got to be so much better on early downs stopping the run. If this team ends up being a mediocre to less than mediocre run-stopping team, then the personnel they added in Owe and Chason, some of these pass rushers, it's going to be somewhat minimized in terms of how great they can be if you're not consistently stopping the run and getting teams into obvious, basically into passing situations and making them less dimensional. And I don't know what kind of run-stopping team they're going to be with Payne and Settle and Kinlaw and the backers. It can't be, again, as bad as it was last year, but that is an area where they've got to improve. All right, let's break. I see everybody else on hold. Sorry, we got to get through one more break. Stay there. Question is, which of the themes that have developed during this preseason will hold up versus those that won't? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. got some information from some of my offshore friends about the Week 1 NFL point spreads and where the public money is right now, and are there any overwhelming public sides? And there are, and one of them is Philadelphia, laying 4.5 against Washington. I'll share with you what the others are a little bit later on in the show. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I jotted down a list of kind of the narratives coming out of training camp last year. A few of them held up. A few of them were way off, like the defense is going to be better, the secondary is going to be great. And then I did the same for this year. You know, there seems to be a concern on Jaden being able to hold up and stay healthy. The offensive line now, people are predicting complete and utter, disarray and a complete mess, especially at the center position. And, you know, this offseason was focused on improving the defense, changing the coordinator, adding talent, and they've done that. So the belief is the defense is going to be much improved. Which one of those things will prove to be true and which ones won't? Ian, go ahead. Thanks for holding.
I think the first two are going to be true. I picked the under when you said the over-under at 13.5 on getting injured. I think he'll play under that.
Is that what I said it at, 13.5 games? I did, didn't I?
Yeah, and I would have said under if it's maybe even 11. I just don't trust his ability not to get hurt with his playing style, his frame, and of course, as Skip said, it's related to the offensive line. I agree that the defense will be better. I agree that Dan Quinn will be on the hot seat pretty quickly. And when you kind of mentioned that this last year was an aberration for Jaden Daniels, you could say the same thing about Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. They had no injury history prior to them having an extensive injury history. Joe Burrow didn't, and Lamar Jackson didn't. So I don't know if that's really sound logic, because.
But what other logic would you use?
I
if
don't
not
equate
for
college
actual historical data on the player.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm asking seriously. I don't know what else you would use.
Oh, I think I would just use his playing style, and his frame is what makes him more injury prone. That's when you look at Josh Allen or a big quarterback, and then you look at Jaden Daniels, and you're like, as somebody said a long time ago, he looks like a basketball player, and that's not a football player. Those are two completely different sports, and no one's debating his athleticism and ability, but his, like you even said, his desire to run on 2nd and 10 in the first quarter straight into people is concerning. I think every Washington fan held their breath this past preseason when the pocket collapsed on him in 2 seconds, in 1 second. Like, you're like, oh my God, is he going to get hurt? Like, every hit feels like it could be a career ender. And he runs into a lot of coverage in college and in the pros. So that's my evidence of why I think he'll get hurt. He looks like he wants to get hurt.
All right. Thank you for that. I was looking up. You're right about Lamar Jackson. You're right about Joe Burrow. They did not have injury history before. But you know who did have some injury history coming into the NFL, and then he has stayed relatively healthy until, I shouldn't say relatively, because he's missed some games here and there. But last year was the real first serious injury. But Mahomes had some injury history in college coming in. But that's the reverse of what we're talking about. Okay, let's go to Billy and Chantilly. Billy, go ahead.
Kevin, good morning. I think we'd agree that I've thrown a lot of good calls this preseason, right?
If you don't say so yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah,
I don't.
Thank you.
I think I think the one that really, really irritated people, if my memory serves me correctly, is that the signing of Diggs means the downfall of the season. Didn't you say that?
That's one of my comments right now, is that the wide receiver room has improved. The problem now is
Well,
You're
wait,
gonna give
hold
up
on.
a
Was I
spot
right
where he-
about the? Am I thinking
Oh,
of
yes,
you that you
100%.
basically said
100%.
signing a guy like Diggs is going to ruin this
100%.
team?
100%.
Yeah, but it
And
didn't
it makes
ruin
it worse,
New
right?
England last year, right?
Well, that's why they kept him. Oh, that's right. They didn't keep
No,
him.
but
They
it didn't
do-
ruin their season last year, did it?
Didn't do anything for him.
Oh, it didn't. They went to the Super Bowl.
No,
He
they
was
made
their
the
leading
Super
receiver.
Bowl. Big deal.
He-
Kevin.
right, because you got
We're
to
in
win it if you
Washington.
get there. Sure. Okay.
We're
sound
we're
logic.
in Washington.
Go ahead.
We don't want to make Super Bowls. We want to win Super Bowls.
Yeah, well, that's the way
Yeah.
we used to think 30 years ago, Billy.
Well,
But go ahead. What do you got on the
nobody's
themes
ever
coming out of
accused
this
me
summer?
of being the most evolved caller. The problem with Diggs right now, too, is you got a bunch of good young guys, and I'm afraid to cut one of them, and they end up being a good second-tier or even first-tier receiver. Listen, here's going to be the biggest narrative. They should have drafted an offensive lineman. And that's just, it's hindsight. But the reality is, as a general manager, with that number 7 pick, Spano is tearing guys limb from limb. He was drafted 2 players behind Sonny, and he's already a starter in Cleveland. He's tearing people limb from limb, and they should have drafted a
Spencer.
lineman.
By the way, it's Spencer Fano. I don't know what you have.
Fano.
Yeah, okay, I thought you said
Yeah.
Spano. Secondly, how many regular season games has old Spencer played so far?
Whether or not he plays well or not, they should have drafted a lineman.
Oh.
That's the choice. This time last year, we're going to say we should have drafted an offensive lineman.
Okay, you
The
might be
most
right.
important player on your team, Kevin, we all agree the most important player on the team is Jaden Daniels. He needs to be protected, and general managers need to see 3 chess moves ahead. I don't have to because I'm a fan, but GMs need to say, well, if we lose our center or don't sign a center and we lose an offensive lineman like Tunsil, we need another guy. Let's bring in another guy. And
Right.
it's the third and final and
Let's
most
not
challenging
forget
thing.
that they made a massive trade for a left tackle last year and used their first-round pick in 2025 to draft another tackle.
Loved it.
It's not
Loved
like
it.
they
Loved
haven't
it all.
invested in the position.
They needed another
They
one.
have.
They needed another one. You said he should have signed, what's his name at center. You said that.
Well, I said that Cole
the-
Kublik said that Parker Brailsford, the guy from Alabama, was there in the 5th round for him, and he would have been. He thinks he's one of the most underrated players, or was one of the most underrated players in the draft. If you're talking about Tyler Linderbaum, yeah, I would have loved to have had Tyler Linderbaum, and it would look much nicer right now if Tyler Linderbaum had been overpaid slightly. The problem is it wasn't going to be a slight overpayment. It was going to be a massive overpayment. And again, it's not like you have a choice. He had the choice. He chose Vegas. What else you got about the
7.5
themes going into this year? We've gotten off
The
track.
7.5 over under. The 7.5 over under is a reflection by Vegas that Jaden Daniels is not going to survive the season because he's so good. If he plays the whole year, we win 10 games. That's how good he is. He's worth 10 or 11 games by himself. That 7.5 tells you that he's not playing every single game. That's what Vegas.
So you agree that he's probably not going to stay healthy. You agree that the offensive line's a mess. What about the defense?
That's the message that Vegas sends. I don't care about the defense. We got Jaden Daniels.
Okay.
If Jaden Daniels plays every game, we win. I don't care about the defense. If he
Another
plays every game, we
superlative
win.
call. I mean, outstanding call from Billy, who's utterly uncoachable. Let's go to our other uncoachable caller, Mark in Largo. Please have at it.
Look, Kevin, I'm gonna say something to you that may surprise you, may sound intelligent. There's no way in hell.
You've said some intelligent things before. It's not going to shock me.
There's no way in hell. If you look at Philadelphia, 2 years ago, the one person that destroyed their defense was Jaden Daniels. There's no way in hell you can put, with the way the center position is right now, you're going to put Jaden over the center against the 2 behemoths of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. He won't survive. You're going to have to put him in the shotgun or the pistol or the pocket. No one's talked about that yet. But
Your
the way
favorite,
the
your
offense-
favorite thing
the
to
center-
say in every call after you've said something that you believe is profound
that no one is talking
is
about
that no
yet.
one else has talked about that.
Because y'all haven't.
I think I've
You haven't.
mentioned the center position against Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis in the opener no less than a dozen times in the last 3 shows. I don't expect you to
Okay.
listen to every minute of every show, trust me. But you're not the only person talking about it. But continue.
But okay. In a sense, I do think that. I mean, I don't know if it was a overkill for everything else that's going on with everybody. Look, if we don't get the center position resolved, it's going to be a long season. And yes, I could see the last caller did say something that made a lot of sense. If Jaden Daniels plays 17 games, I think this team wins 13, 14 games. That's just the way I feel too. But he's not going to play 17 games if you don't resolve the center position. You know, I mean, the left tackle and the right tackle, I think, can be taken care of. And you got talent at the wide receiver position. But I just feel like it's kind of setting Dan Quinn up to fail. And thank God Adam Peters is finally going on the Junkies because, God, I mean, I would love – the one person I would love to see call and just have a conversation with him, Doc Walker. Because Doc Walker wouldn't bite his tongue about anything to ask Adam Peters about anything. Because he is furious with Adam Peters right now. I don't know if you listened to his show in the last 3 months.
I have not listened to him, but he's going to join me tomorrow on my podcast. So what's so interesting as you were talking, I was thinking to myself that wouldn't it be ironic if Allegretti is healthy, starts the season, remains healthy, and is actually solid at center along with Cosme and Paul, and the real issues are the tackles. Because Connerly Jr., I'll be honest with you, concerns me a bit going into a second year. I think long term they will have gotten it right with him, but I think he's still a young player. He's still trying to get stronger. And they are playing right now. We don't know how it'll flush out when they get to these games, but they're playing, a schedule with, on paper, excellent defensive teams, excellent pass rushing defensive teams. So I think what would be ironic is ultimately if the offensive line struggled at tackles, but center and guards were okay. Look, I think most people have a lot of faith in Cosme, but their plan at center actually hasn't had a chance to, play yet. Hopefully he will, and hopefully he will be ready for Philly, and he'll be everything that they thought he was going to be when they decided he was going to be the starting center. But they're going to scour the waiver wire. They're going to perhaps look to make a trade. They're going to try to add something between now and, mid next week as they're getting ready for the regular season in terms of that center position. What else? Do you have anything else for me that we haven't heard and no one else is talking about?
Well, let me ask you this, Kevin. Of the two, which one do you have more confidence in, Coleman or Connolly? See, I have more confidence in Coleman. So I do kind of agree with you on the Connolly right now. But go ahead.
I don't know. Probably I might be with you on this. It might be a little bit more with Coleman, even though I don't think Coleman's Tunsil, obviously. And they're going to miss a lot without Tunsil. But I am a little bit like I know that Connerly got better last year, but he was never a great right tackle last year in his rookie year. But he shouldn't necessarily be a great right tackle as a rookie. He's a very young player. We're not going to know if they got it right on Connerly for another year or two. But he's got to get stronger so that he can handle the likes of what's coming in his direction with pass rushers this year. Because they got a lot of them on their schedule. I mean, he's going to probably have to line up at some point against Myles Garrett in that Rams game on November 8th, a week after the Philadelphia game. So, and by the way, a week before he goes against Brian Burns and company and Abdul Carter with the Giants. They've got some real players defensively. Again, you don't know what it'll look like when you get there. They might be all injured or they might have off years. Who knows? But this O-line's got some real defensive menaces to deal with right now based on what the schedule looks like. Thanks, Mark and Largo. All right. Bill Barnwell wrote a story on ESPN.com predicting the 5 teams that he thinks will surprise in 2026 and the 5 teams that will take a major step back in 2026. We'll go through that list next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, and theteam980.com.
I've said Washington last place is my pick. Jaden Daniels, 3 snaps, incompletion, sack, run play, punt, all we saw. The offensive line is bad. I don't like the vibe of this franchise, ownership down. Cliff Kingsbury bailed. Ben Johnson, after interviewing, said it's a lot of basketball guys who think they know football. They just do not have enough good young players because they've given up draft picks to get where they're at, and they had a bad weekend.
Even Colin knows 3 plays does not, warrant a conclusion. But that was Colin Cowherd on his show. Cliff didn't bail, Colin. They parted ways. Best case for him, mutually. But that probably wasn't exactly the way it went down. I got this from Todd in Olney. He writes, Kevin, NFL teams that add as many players that are new don't win. Free agency isn't the answer in the NFL because cohesion and familiarity is vital to success. I'm predicting another disastrous season and everybody gets fired. Yeah, I mean, this seems to be, something that everybody's jumping on right now. And I do think that some of the injuries, I think the Tunsil injury is a big deal. I do, for a lot of people. It's a big deal for me as well. Bill Barnwell, by the way, Todd, you're kind of off on the free agency thing. Not in general. Over the years, probably more teams have not put it together with primarily free agent additions versus building through the draft. But last year was a bad example for what you think can't work in the NFL because both Seattle and New England in particular, went nuts on free agency, and it turned their whole season around. They went from 4-13 to 13 to 4-13 to 14-3. That 10-game improvement was the largest for any team this century. You got to go back to 99 to find a bigger improvement in one season than what New England did last year, with 13 of its top 22 players being newly acquired free agents on offense and defense last year. Now, they also got a new coach, and Vrabel's a hell of a coach, and that helped as well. And then Seattle, the same thing. A lot of new additions, including at quarterback, obviously, via free agency, and they made a massive jump. Remember, this time last year, New England was a team with a win total of 7.5, with most people probably playing the under, and Seattle had a 7.5 over-under win total as well. Bill Barnwell put together a list of the top 5 teams that he thinks will take a step forward and 5 teams that will take a major step back. And he points out that last year saw 7 teams have their records improve or decline by at least 6 wins, the most in any season since 2008. So let me just make sure you guys understood that. Teams either improved or declined by at least 6 wins from 2024, and that was the most since any season in 2008. Look, every NFL season sees, not necessarily half on average, but probably 46% on average of the playoff teams be new playoff teams each year. It's the nature of the league. There's just great variability year to year. Every year is a new year. Every week is almost a new week in this league. But he then tries to pick 5 teams that are going to improve significantly versus 5 that won't. We'll get to the 5 that are going to improve here, and then we'll have Liam Griffin from the Washington Times on, and then we'll get to the 5 that are going to take major steps back. Is Bill Barnwell going to select Washington as one of those teams to improve significantly? Number 1 team, Kansas City Chiefs. They were 6-11 last year. They were 1-9 in games decided by 7 or fewer points. Remember how they absolutely killed the close games the year before. And of course, it's very obvious that with Patrick Mahomes back rather than hurt for much of the year, they've got a really good chance to take a significant jump forward. The Lions would be the obvious second pick. You know, they were 9-8 last year. By the way, every team in that division, including Minnesota, who struggled, they finished 9-8 last year. That whole division, the NFC North, every team had a winning record. But the Lions dropped from 7-2 in one-score games in 2024 to 2-5 last year. It's not as obvious, Bill Barnwell writes, as with the Chiefs because of the return of Mahomes. But the Lions' risk-taking, analytics-driven fourth down, decisions went 0 for 5 in a midseason game against the Eagles, turning 6 trips into Philly territory into just 9 points. And then they blew it again in a last-second, game against the Steelers that could have been a win late in the season. He believes Detroit is on the list of teams that will turn it around. The Giants he's got as a team that will turn it around in 2026. 4-13 last year, 1-6 in games decided by 7 or fewer points. A big theme for Barnwell in that eventually that will even out. He writes, I'd argue that the Giants quietly had a more competitive season, even if Dable wasn't around to see the end of it. Yes, New York finished 4-13, but it's Pythagorean, as in the Pythagorean theory. Expectation suggests that the Big Blue performed at a 7.1 win rate. Accounting for the 17-game schedule, the Giants are only one of 13 teams since 1990 to finish 3+ wins short of their expected win total by point differential, joining last season's Chiefs on that list. And then he had the Jets, a 3-14 team, as a team that will take a major jump this year. He writes, the Jets did something that nobody in the NFL history managed before. Despite hiring former starting cornerback Aaron Glenn as the team's head coach, the Jets simply could not catch the football on defense. They went all season without even a single interception. First time in NFL history that's happened. The Jets went 0 for 503, meaning 503 pass attempts against with 0 interceptions. As if that wasn't enough, the Jets were also unlucky in terms of recovering fumbles, ranking 31st behind the Lions by grabbing just 35% of balls that were loose on the ground. On defense, the Jets recovered 4 of the 14 fumbles they forced in total. Those 4 turnovers the Jets forced are the fewest for any team since 1934. The Jets' 4 takeaways were the fewest since 1934. By the way, Washington was next with 10 total takeaways in terms of at the bottom. Those are the teams. Oh, Baltimore is the other team. My fault. Top 5 includes Kansas City, Detroit, the Giants, Jets, and the Ravens, who were 8 and 9 last year. And he writes, Jackson was sidelined by a hamstring injury after healthy and dominant seasons in 23 and 24. The 2-time MVP wasn't the same in 25. And so clearly, if they have him back and he's healthy, he expects a big jump for Baltimore. Washington not listed among those teams. Even though you could say if Jaden Daniels bounces back and has a healthy year, they're just a much better football team, which I do agree with. But a lot of people just looking at the entirety of the Washington roster and sort of bailing on them as a turnaround team in 2026. All right, Liam Griffin from the Washington Times will jump on next. Liam Griffin does a really good job covering sports and covering our Washington football team for the Washington Times. You can follow Liam on X at by Liam Griffin. Dan Quinn did speak today. We'll have some of that sound for you coming up. But I want to go back to Saturday, Liam. Do you think that there was value extracted from 3 offensive snaps for the starters and 2 defensive snaps for, the majority of the starters on defense?
I think ideally they would have loved to get more snaps out of both of those units just so you have a little bit more foundation to work with. But at the end of the day, I think they would tell you that 3 snaps is better than nothing for that offense, having Jaden Daniels out in the position where he can get hit, even if he doesn't have any pass completions and not able to string a drive together. You're able to at least say, all right, when he comes in week 1, the idea that someone else is coming at him full speed, trying to hit him, trying to knock the ball out of his hands is not going to be a completely foreign feeling that he hasn't experienced in, you got to remember he didn't finish the season. So you're looking at 9-10 months. And then same kind of thing with the defense, having them receive that opportunity to gel a little bit. They're going to get more of that in the joint practice, but just to be in a game environment full speed, yeah, you'd like both of those series to go on for a little bit longer so you can see what you have, but I think there is at least a little bit of value there.
That's what they would say. So you agree with that? Because I think the biggest issue that I have is that the game on Saturday is 22 days before the regular season opener, which may be the next time those guys get an opportunity to sort of feel a real game environment. Like if it was a week away, I could see maybe some value there. Over 3 weeks away, I think is a bit of a stretch. But I'll ask you, you kind of described what you think they would say. Would you agree with that?
I'm of 2 minds. I fall somewhere in between where you are and where the team is. If tomorrow morning I get hired as the new coach of the Washington Commanders, maybe I want it on a snap count and say, all right, instead of 1 drive, let's do 10, 12 snaps and, finish out a drive from there. But I don't think it is completely without value. But yeah, I think you need a little bit more work. And I definitely understand the frustration from people who say, how much can you draw? But I think this team is also going to err on the side of caution a bit, given how beaten up they're getting through, as training camp comes to an end here in Ashburn.
All right. We'll get to some of the concern areas that weren't necessarily concern areas a few weeks ago in a moment. But just tell me real quickly, what was your reaction to Will Harris being released today?
I was not surprised that he was going to be released. The writing was kind of on the wall for that. We've seen Quan Martin really start to rise up the depth chart and kind of play to his potential a little bit more. He has a little bit more speed, a little bit more agility than Will Harris had. I was surprised to see it happen today and the fact that they brought in other safeties, so clearly they still need the bodies. But it does make sense when you take a second and think about it, because this is going to give him an opportunity to go find another team to potentially stick time before the season starts. But it has been throughout camp. This is Nick Cross is an every down player. Jeremy Reeves is there too. And everyone else has just been fighting to be the third safety in some of Durante Jones's versatile, scheme, almost agnostic, like deploying players across the field. There's 3 safeties on the field a lot, and more it has been Quan Martin more than Will Harris throughout camp.
Let's talk about, the players that have been banged up, that are missing time currently, and confidence level in them being ready for the opener. I'm going to start with a guy that just sort of hit the injury report here over the weekend. What's the deal with Krosky Merritt?
Yeah, so we saw him come up a little tender during one of the last plays of practice last week in the final session before training camp. You'll notice, I know you said you were going to play some of that Dan Quinn audio, but he's pretty good about, for the most part, being very open about injuries and where a guy stands. So Ben Sinnott, he'll say that guy's got an oblique. We're not too concerned. Bill got the very broad lower body definition, which could mean just about anything. I'm not one to speculate. Our colleague Ben Standig has reported that it could be a groin. It looks like something that would be soft tissue down there, groin, knee, somewhere in that kind of range. But the concern level doesn't seem super high. He was out on the practice field today. He walked down, to the fields with no major problems, said hi to the media. They don't seem particularly concerned about his week 1 availability. But again, I don't think you're going to see him get hit much between now and the opener.
What about week 1 availability for Allegretti, Amos, and Owe?
Yeah, I would feel more confident about Allegretti than those other two, and that's something that has changed for me over the past, it's 11:45, over the past 4 hours, because the media asked Dan Quinn this morning, can you confirm that these guys are going to be there week 1 for Owe and Amos? They're going to be on the field week 1, be part of your defensive starters, and he was not able to do that with any kind of certainty. So Allegretti, I think, because he has been back before.
Hold on, I want to make sure I heard what you just said, because I've not I've been on the air, and so I've not heard any of the Quinn sound from today. But you're saying that with respect to Owe and Amos, that Quinn could not confirm or even suggest any sort of level of comfort that those guys would be ready for week 1?
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow.
I think the question was about him, what rate your confidence level, and he would not rate the confidence level. So I guess that is not a 10 totally confident for those two guys in particular.
But Allegretti, you kind of feel a little bit better about it. I mean, we do have another, at this point, we've got for 12 days until the opener in Philly. What about, because I've seen this name pop up here recently. I forgot to ask you about Sheehan. What about Sheehan?
Yeah, he's another guy who has been working along the side a bunch. Again, it just feels like they're being overly cautious, and they're using it as an opportunity to get guys like Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Joshua Joseph more reps with the first-team defense on the edge. But I think he's in a similar spot to where Owe is, where we haven't received a firm update. And so I think it will depend on how his recovery goes over the next few weeks.
And then what about Ben Sinnott? I mean, and he's got some sort of injury as well, and that might be an extended time, right?
Yeah, so Ben Sinnott, they told us that it was an oblique this morning, suffered over the weekend, and that he will miss at least this week of practice. So no joint practice for Ben Sinnott, no preseason game. I didn't see him out here today, and they did not specify the extent of that injury. But given that we didn't hear he's having surgery on an oblique or anything of that nature, I would not expect that to be a long-term situation, but I expect we'll get a more firm update from Dan Quinn on that next week.
All right, we're talking to Liam Griffin from the Washington Times. I would assume you believe tomorrow is the day for the starters and that none of those people will see the field Friday night at M&T Bank, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of depends on how you're defining starters at some of these positions where there's still some battles.
Yeah,
but like
fair.
Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Stephon Diggs, those guys, I would be shocked if they see any kind of action at M&T Bank Stadium. And so this joint practice tomorrow is going to be big for them as that final tune-up before the regular season starts to kick into high gear.
All right. I think that prior to the Tunsil injury and prior to camp beginning where Allegretti started to get hurt, we did not identify necessarily the offensive line as an area for major concern. But obviously things have changed. What do you think they will do between now and opening day with respect to roster spots, center, and even potentially another tackle or guard? How busy will they be trying to get themselves into a different position than they're in right now prior to Philadelphia on the 13th?
I think they're going to be extremely busy. I would think that Adam Peters and his staff are already hard at work trying to identify guys who might be, the 9th or 10th offensive lineman on different rosters around the league, because if you're the 9th or 10th guy over there, you have a good shot at making the roster over here. As far as bringing in guys like Matt Golbin has been pretty solid throughout camp. He's got some versatility on the interior of the line. The Julian Good-Jones experiment, I feel like, is nearing its end and has not been an overwhelming success. So in my 53-man roster projection right now, I do not have Julian Good-Jones on it, but I do have a TBD slot for whoever they're able to bring in. And so I would be expecting more workouts to hit the transaction wire for them, working out more offensive linemen, and then just seeing what they can make happen, whether that's a guy like Togiai, who's an undrafted rookie who is on this roster, who has played a lot during preseason, an athletic freak. There's a chance maybe he can make a surge, but they need something to happen. They need a change. They need more depth because that offensive line has just been ravaged, and they're one other injury away from a kind of shaky offensive line looking really tough. So, for example, Brandon Coleman was working individually today. He got a little bit of a rest day before a joint practice that's padded tomorrow. And so you see Trent Scott out there a lot. And I don't think you feel great if your offensive line is Trent Scott, Chris Paul, Matt Gulpin, or Julian Good-Jones, potentially, and then Cosby and Connerly on the other side. Like, all of a sudden, the left side of that line gets very shaky. Yeah, it gets very shaky very quick. And so depth on that offensive line can be so huge. This new scheme that's being implemented by David Blau, it can help hide some of your deficiencies in the offensive line a bit. You're not having those, true drop back pass sets that you might have had under Cliff Kingsbury, but you still need them to do a lot of work with this zone running scheme. And so I would expect them to be making a lot of calls, hosting a lot of workouts over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, part of me is just kind of like projecting what I'm going to see, early in the Philadelphia game offensively. And they're clearly, I would think, based on what they have right now and the scheme we expect to see employed to begin with, some 12 and 13 personnel. And then will the actual defensive front move towards the back part of the defense, or will it be in the backfield? Because if they can't run the football, then you're talking about, well, you got to have a bunch of quick game. You got to put some of that RPO that Cliff had, a high level of it, into the offense to create it. Like you said, you can do a lot of things scheme-wise, and I bet Blau's sharp enough to come up with the ways that you can mask some of those issues. And we won't know for sure, but Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis and company with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell is not exactly, well, I guess in some ways it's the best way to start because you'll really know where you are. All right, I want to talk about a couple of these position groups that they're going to have to cut down by Sunday at 6 o'clock. And what right now is the position unit that you think will be the most challenging for them to cut down to the right number on?
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. What group
That's
is the
right.
most challenging
What's going to be the
cut down
most
to?
difficult position unit for cuts for them?
It's a toss-up for me. I'll give you one on offense and one on defense between wide receiver and linebacker, because you've got an array of players there who, if this team had a little bit less depth at those positions, if they hadn't made some acquisitions throughout the offseason, you might say that Jordan McGee, for example, at linebacker, is a guy who might be playing some, critical snaps for you. That doesn't really seem to be the case this year. But between Jordan McGee, Ale Cajo, and Kane Medrano at linebacker, I'm not sure that they're going to have the space for all three of those guys on the 53-man roster, the game day roster. And so it's going to come down to things like special teams for them. Everyone's favorite, most exciting thing to talk about before the season is who's going to be on your coverage unit.
The Givens are Luvu, Styles, and Chenal, right? So
yes, yeah.
How many do they keep there? Is that a position where you keep 4 or 5?
I see that as a position where they keep 5, especially because they're running pretty deep at safety. So I think Percy Butler, Tyler Owens are going to be on this roster as kind of special team stalwarts now that Jeremy Reeves has moved up the defensive depth chart. So I think that kind of takes a roster spot away from the linebackers. And so I think you keep 2 out of 3. Medrano,
Cajo, McGee, and Medrano.
And,
2 out of those 3. So who gets left out, in your opinion?
For me, I mean, it's a real toss-up, I think, because Medrano is a little bit faster. He's really got great athleticism. He can flash a bit more on special teams, but Cajo has been wearing the green dot with some of the backup defensive units. I think they really like what they have in him. But as of right now, I think that McGee is on the roster, Cajo is on the roster, Medrano's on the practice squad, and at some point will end up being an elevation to the game day roster at some point, but that's where I have it right now.
All right, wide receiver, I think everybody understands that this is going to be not an easy one, and it's not because you've got elite-level receivers everywhere, but that you have a lot of players, and you've improved the depth of that position from last year. I'll start with this. How many receivers get kept? Is it 7 or 8? And then I want to hear the Liam Griffin list of players that make it and players that don't.
Okay, so right now I think it's going to be 7. I think some guys right at the bottom of that have made it really difficult. So as of right now, I'm going to run out of fingers because I'm holding a phone in one hand.
Count.
We'll see if I get
I'll
this
count.
number right. So, so we got Terry, Stephon Diggs, Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane, and then I have Traylon Burks, De'Ami Brown, and Antonio Williams as the first offensive draft pick they had. I think that puts me at 7, with De'Ami and Traylon Burks being the kind of bottom of the depth chart guys that have just kind of impressed me throughout camp, and I think that the coaching staff would feel a similar way. Traylon Burks just seems to make every red zone play imaginable. He has a body type that is not really present throughout the rest of that position group. And so he's able to high point the ball. He's got great ball skills. Obviously, he made a catch of the year contender last season. And look, he's not going to be a Pro Bowl caliber returner, but he's someone that has done that work during training camp. And so in a pinch, if you have injuries to guys like Jalen Lane and Luke McCaffrey like you did last year, they feel pretty comfortable putting Traylon Burks there. And then De'Ami Brown is a Dan Quinn favorite. He's got great speed, great athleticism. That year in Jacksonville, where he ended up being a healthy scratch for a few games, I think has really inspired him to try to really put his nose to the grindstone a little bit more. He's doing more special teams work. He seems ready to take on that kind of, that part of the depth chart as wide receiver 6 or 7 role. So that's the 7 that I've got right now, with Van Jefferson is probably the most notable cut there as a guy who's he's a really fluid route runner. He's got great skills, but just because of, bringing in Stephon Diggs, you don't have the space for him. And then Jaden Bradley, the rookie, again, talking about big-bodied receivers. He's made tons of splash plays throughout camp and the preseason games, but just don't have the space. I think he might be number 1 on their practice squad list as a guy they want to try to groom into something going forward.
Yeah, Bradley, Jefferson obviously would be the 2 that would be left out if you go with 7. If they went with 8, who do you think the 8th would be, Bradley or Jefferson?
I think it would be Bradley, just because I think having that young guy, having that body type,
Sure.
With Jefferson, you're kind of duplicating skill sets a little bit. He does a little bit of what Stephon Diggs does, and what honestly I think you're going to see Antonio Williams do. They joked at draft time they're calling Antonio Williams smooth operator because of how fluid he is in his route running, and he's still getting the hang of that at an NFL level. But I think, if you lose Stephon Diggs, you're comfortable enough maybe elevating Jalen Lane, who's route running they started to compliment, and Antonio Williams into that role. And so I think you give a shot to the undrafted rookie and say, hey, Jaden Bradley, go make some special teams plays, go be a big body, and we'll see what you got.
Last question. Give me a player that as you've, been out there and you've covered this since training camp began, that you think is going to make a much bigger contribution to the 2026 season than most people think. So it's not a starter probably. It could be sort of a fringe starter, but somebody that you have a hunch or maybe that you think the team has been laying low on that's going to end up being a much bigger contributor than most people think.
I think that there's a chance that Joshua Joseph makes K'Lavon Chaisson less relevant on this roster as the season goes on. He has been fantastic throughout training camp. Everything that you saw as a potential positive with his speed, his strength, he's got these enormous arms to give him great leverage. You've seen all of that throughout camp. He's even comfortable dropping into coverage a little bit, which isn't something I was fully prepared for, but in this Durante Jones system, it's something that he's going to have to do. And with Dorrance Armstrong out for week 1, these kind of lingering injuries to Oweh and Chaisson, I think there's a chance that he, we're talking at Halloween that he leaves this team in sacks, and there's a chance he might not relinquish that role if he's able to really hit the ground running. And I think he hasn't been talked about much. As a later pick, you would expect that, but I think you're going to see more and more people start to take notice of him as this season gets into the colder months.
Good job, Liam. Appreciate it as always.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yep, Liam Griffin from the Washington Times, @by Liam Griffin on X. All right, when we come back, the 5 teams that Bill Barnwell thinks will take a major step back in 2026. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Bill Barnwell, who I love to have on the show, has written in back-to-back days his annual top 5 teams that will exceed their over-under win total in 2026, and his top 5 teams that will not go over. They will stay under their win totals. He's done very well with this column, specifically his decline column, teams that will decline. 34-9 at picking teams that will fall short of their win total from the previous season. We went through the 5 teams that he expects to outperform this year to take a leap forward, and that list includes Kansas City, Detroit, the Giants, the Jets, and the Ravens. I actually personally, in looking at the league, I think there are a couple of teams I would add to it, and I think Washington is one of them. It's not a homer pick. I would just right now use Washington as almost a contrarian pick, because right now Washington's over-under at 7.5 is plus money on the over. It was minus money on the over a month ago, meaning they wanted you to pay more. It was more expensive to bet the over than it was the under. Now it's more expensive to bet the under than the over. And so there is definitely a turn on Washington's expected 2026 season. There are a lot of people expecting this season to not go well, and certainly the injuries in the preseason haven't helped them. They probably have the number one lost player in the preseason, that being Laramie Tunsil. I really, really like the Saints to take a big jump this year. They're one of the teams that I think has it. Now, they've had some major injuries as well in preseason, wide receiver, and then Kamara's going to be out for a while. I actually like the Raiders to make a big jump from where they were last year and go over their overall under win total, which right now is at their projected wins for the Raiders is at 6.5 right now. I like them to go over that. But that would be it on the high side. I'll give you my prop bets. I have not made one prop bet yet. I typically will bet 3 or 4 over-under win totals before a season begins. I think last year I went 2-2 or 2-3 on those picks. The year before, I think I was like 4-2 or 4-1. Last year, not so great. I think I had Washington in the over. I forget who else I had in the over. Maybe Kansas City. I had Pittsburgh on the over. That worked out. Now, here's Barnwell's list of the 5 teams he expects to take a major step back. And this is a list he's done very well with in recent years. Last year, his 4 teams he did very well with. His 5 teams, he hit on 4 of the 5. Minnesota, he said, would take a step back. Washington, he said, would take a step back. Kansas City and Detroit, he thought would take step backs as well. And he was right about all those. Number 1 on his list is Chicago. He thinks Chicago had one of those good fortune seasons last year. They were 3-7 in one-score games in 2024. They were 7-4 in games decided by 7 points or fewer in 2025. And there were some wild games in which they ended up coming out on the positive end. Week 4 against the Raiders, the Bears drove down the field for a touchdown to take a 25-24 lead with 1:39 to go. They didn't make the 2-point conversion, leaving them 1 point up. Raiders drove into field goal range, and Chicago blocked the game-winning field goal, so they held on to a 1-point lead. We know what happened here. Washington essentially on a 3rd and 1 needed a first down to almost lock the game up, and Jaden Daniels fumbled in the exchange with Bill Krosky-Merritt. Bears took over, ended up walking off Washington on a Jake Moody 38-yard field goal at the gun. The game they played against Cincinnati last year was one of the games of the year. They were up 41-27 with under 5 minutes to go. The Bengals with Joe Flacco came back and took a 42-41 lead with 54 seconds left. They went for the 2 after the first touchdown, made it. And then Caleb Williams on a 3rd and 10, scrambling around, finds Colston Loveland for a not field goal range completion, but a 58-yard, basically nearly walk-off touchdown and they ended up winning that game 48-42, a wild game in Cincinnati. Then they trailed the Giants, the Bears did, at home 20-10 with 6 minutes left. They drove, scored a touchdown, got the ball back, then drove down for another touchdown and a walk-off winner, or a late fourth quarter winner for the Bears. The following week, J.J. McCarthy drove the length of the field for a touchdown that gave Minnesota a 17-16 lead with 50 seconds to go. I mean, that is 4 games right there where they were in big trouble with less than a minute to go and ended up winning the games. And then Devin Duvernay had a 56-yard return, setting up a game-winning field goal to beat them. Remember that Saturday night December game against the Packers where Jordan Love went out, but the Packers were still dominating the game. They're up 16-6. Bears kicked a field goal with less than 2 minutes to go, not enough timeouts left. They recovered an onside kick. They went down, they scored, they ended up winning in overtime. They just had a lot of things go their way. And look, I thought by the end of the year last year, they were playing very good football offensively, and Caleb Williams had made the adjustment to the Ben Johnson system. But he predicts the Bears to take a big step back, as he does with AFC Championship participant Denver, 14-3 last year. They obviously did not have their starting quarterback, Bo Nix, in that AFC Championship game. He thinks Denver's defense will still be one of the best in the game, and he points out, and I totally agree with this, I think Nick Bonito is truly one of the underrated pass-rushing menaces, I mean disruptors, in the game. Remember what he did on the 2-point conversion when Washington was going for it in that Sunday night game to try to win the game, and he totally disrupted Mariota, and they held on to a 27-26 win. He's got Denver taking a step back, with the offense taking a step back from where it was last year. Remember, they're going with a new play caller. Sean Payton is not going to call plays in Denver. Davis Webb is going to call plays. He thinks Jacksonville will take a step back this year, in part because they took a massive leap. It wasn't quite the New England leap. New England went from 4-13 to 14-3. Jacksonville went from 4-13 to 13-4 in Liam Cohen's first year. They had last year, heading into 2025, the lack of takeaways was a major problem. They picked off only 6 passes and forced only 9 takeaways in the entire 2024 season, and that was last in the league. And then last year, here they come with a lot of takeovers and a top 5 turnover margin, which ended up being a big determinant for them. I actually liked that football team at the end of last year. I think they are really good on defense and getting better. And I think Trevor Lawrence is still a guy that has a major upside. By the way, for those that wanted Washington to try to get Brian Thomas Jr., apparently he has had a much more mature offseason and summer, and they are expecting him to have a season that mirrors more of the rookie year rather than last year when they were trying to trade him. He's got Carolina. Remember, they were 8-9, and they won the division at 8-9, taking a step back. He also has the Patriots taking a step back from 14-3, and the 2025 schedule was kind of easy last year. I think the big thing with the Patriots you got to look at from last year is that they did not play good defensive football teams during the regular season. And because of it, they were really good on offense. Their defense actually was slow to develop last year. They were having some issues, even against some bad teams who were moving the football against them. They lost to the Raiders in the opener. Miami put up 27 against them last year. New Orleans moved the football against them. So did teams like the Giants at times. Their defense was not great, and then it got better and better and better as the season went along. And the offense was benefiting clearly from a schedule with weak defensive football teams, with the exception of Cleveland, who they faced in a game in October that they ended up winning 32-13, but they were actually in a game at halftime that was 9-7. It's like all of Cleveland's games last year. It's like the first half, they're dominant, their defense keeps them in the game, and then it's like the offense can't do enough. The defense is on the field too long, and the opponent wears them down. But when they got to that postseason, and they faced four, including in the Super Bowl, but 4 teams that were top 10 across the board defensively, they struggled. They struggled against the Chargers offensively. They struggled against the Texans offensively. They struggled against Denver offensively and got lucky in that game. Very lucky in that the storm came in the second half. They had the lead, and they were facing Jarrett Stidham instead of Bo Nix. And then it caught up to them when they got absolutely, shut down by Seattle in the Super Bowl. Couldn't literally gain more than a first down or two in the first half. They generated some offense, if you recall, down, whatever it was, 23-0 in the fourth quarter. But that was a reality test for New England, and we'll see if they can, improve offensively. They've added A.J. Brown. They've added Romeo Doubs. They have an excellent offensive coordinator. They're certainly hoping Will Campbell, in his second year after they took him so high as a left tackle, ends up being a better player than he was last year, because they had offensive line issues as well, especially with their rookie left tackle. But I think New England is an obvious candidate for a step back, certainly a step back season from 14-3. That's the list of the 5 teams he expects to take a step back. Chicago, followed by Denver, followed by Jacksonville, Carolina, and then New England. The step back seasons, I kind of can buy into New England a little bit, but they are well coached. That's the one thing that I'd be concerned about. I think Philadelphia is in step back mode. That's the team that I just have a hunch steps back this year. Pittsburgh would be an obvious choice. I think they've actually gotten better roster-wise. They were 9-8 last year. I don't expect much from Minnesota. Some people do. I don't. I'm not a big believer in Kyler Murray. All right. When we come back. So I was thinking about the Tunsil loss and the Diggs addition. Which would you prefer? Diggs on the roster without Tunsil, or Tunsil on the roster healthy without Diggs? If you could swap, would you? Tunsil's healthy body in the lineup for Diggs. Because when they added Diggs before Tunsil got hurt, it was like, here we go. This team's got a chance. And then all of a sudden, Tunsil and then the Allegretti injuries, and here we are. 301-230-0980. A hypothetical radio sports talk segment. If you could go back and say, Diggs signed somewhere else, but you've got Tunsil healthy in the lineup, would you do it? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, and the team980.com. You know, the two big stories of training camp in terms of the things that you can really like touch and feel versus the, abstract, the things that really are hard to decipher, really, the performances in these preseason games or joint practices, et cetera, in terms of what that will mean. The addition of Stephon Diggs was a major sort of pre-training camp addition. This was a team that did not have an obvious number 2 wide receiver. There were candidates for it, but they were all maybes. There wasn't an obvious veteran that's done it before that is coming off a season recently in which he performed at a high level for a team that went to the Super Bowl, and by all accounts was an absolute pleasure for everybody to have in that locker room. Yep, they did not bring him back, but the reason for that is they had bigger aspirations. A.J. Brown, Romeo Doubs, to add to their existing receiver room and tight end room, which performed at a pretty decent level alongside Stephon Diggs last year. But that was a big acquisition. By the way, since that acquisition, how many times have we talked about Brandon Ayuk? 0. What happened to him? Is he off social media? Has he been arrested yet? Has he returned to California yet? Like, I've not followed the Ayuk story for a month now. When did they sign Diggs? About a month ago?
Yeah, it's about right.
I mean, what is the latest with Ayuk? I just sort of thought about that as I was talking. It's like, have we heard anything about that situation, or is he still status quo, not doing what he needs to do to play football again?
As far as I am aware, we are still in the Brandon Ayuk is sitting in limbo, waiting to get activated off of the reserve or the missing list or whatever by the Niners to get out of his contract. Like that's kind of where we stand. That's where we've stood, and it's where we still are.
It looks like he weighed in on the Jed York arrest on social media.
Don't know if that was real.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
Not 100% sure. Very funny, though, from his
he
perspective.
What was real was when he mocked Kyle Shanahan's car crash.
That was real. That was real.
Yeah, that was a brilliant move on his part.
Incredibly smart.
Okay. Anyway, Stephon Diggs was added to the roster, and it's like, okay, the one question mark about this team offensively, do you have another receiver to run alongside Terry? And I think most people agreed they did a good job in signing Diggs. And the deal itself was a good team-friendly deal. And then camp started, and it's been a bit of a train wreck in terms of, Tunsil going down being the major piece of news that is going to stand on itself moving forward. He's not going to be available to play for the majority of the regular season. But then there's been a lot of other injuries as well, and we'll see what happens with respect to the availability for the games that matter starting on September 13th. But I was thinking about, the Tunsil injury and the Diggs acquisition being really post-draft the two biggest, pieces of news that were real about this football team's roster. And the hypothetical would be if you could go back and keep Laramie Tunsil healthy but not sign Stephon Diggs, would you do it? 301-230-0980. Would you swap Diggs for a healthy Tunsil? My answer is going to surprise you, I think. 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open for that. All right. Would you, if you could do it, pure hypothetical, would you go back and let Diggs sign with somebody else but have a healthy Tunsil for 2026? My answer is going to surprise you because the answer should be Tunsil because he's truly an elite level player. He's your second best player on the roster after Jaden Daniels, at least as we see the roster today. But I really felt like there could be a problem at wide receiver without someone else who can legitimately give the quarterback some, an opportunity to throw somebody that's open or to throw somebody open consistently, like he will be able to do with Terry. And the idea that, yes, they've got better players at wide receiver, but are any of them legitimate contributors to a winning team? I don't know that we knew that. And I don't think we still know that in terms of everybody but Terry and Diggs. And I do feel like Brandon Coleman can play the position, and you can coach around a little bit more issues along your offensive line, quick game, RPO, run the football, etc., if there's a pass protection issue, more so than you can with guys that are able to get open. Last year, they just didn't have anybody on the field that could consistently get open. And yes, they've got Chigakonkwo, and Okonkwo is likely going to be either the second or the third most targeted and probably will finish either second or third in receptions, somewhere around there. I think Diggs' acquisition, if he plays to the level he played at last year, is actually slightly more important than having a healthy Laramie Tunsil. It sounds insane because when I first thought about this, I'm like, well, it's going to be Tunsil for me, and it's going to be Tunsil for everybody. But I actually think in some ways they can cover up for that a little bit more than you could cover up if you don't have another receiver that can actually get open. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. If you could swap Diggs for a healthy Tunsil, would you do it? 301-230-0980. Max, what's your answer?
It's a good question. I posed this question on Twitter.
It's not really a good question.
No, it's a fun hypothetical that you can do at the end of August.
It's a hypothetical, yes.
But, yeah, give me Tunsil. Give me the guarantee that Jaden's not going to have to keep looking over his shoulder every time he's trying to go through his reads. Give me that over what Stephon Diggs brings. Plus, if this were the case, hypothetically, could have gone back and made a trade with the Patriots for one Kayshon Boutte or even another receiver on that roster that might end up getting cut or not making it. So that would probably be my avenue if we had a healthy Tunsil, but we're at where we're at.
That's a good answer on the fact that there were still other possibilities, like a Kayshon Boutte who got traded to Houston yesterday for Jalen Reed, their safety, and a 7th rounder, I think it was. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting aspect of it, whereas there's not really a left tackle opportunity, right now via trade, and if there was one, it would probably be expensive. But I still wouldn't say that Kayshon Boutte is what they're getting in Stephon Diggs for this year. Kayshon Boutte would have been better moving forward, and you could have looked at, a potential, extension at some point next offseason for a guy that's much younger. But, yeah, this is you did put it up as our Waldorf Honda Twitter poll of the day. Our poll of the day driven by Waldorf Honda. It all starts with a click, waldorfhonda.com. I'm interested to see where that comes in. I'm just going to go with just barely a slight no. I'll keep Diggs, and we'll try to game plan around a pretty solid left tackle replacement in Brandon Coleman. That's so against what I thought I would answer right when I thought of this. It was Tunsil immediately, and then I thought about it. I feel so good about Diggs and Terry and Okonkwo. And then whatever else is out on the field for Jaden. Let's go to Rodney in D.C. Rodney, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, love the hypothetical, man, but I'm reversing what you're saying. I'm definitely taking Tunsil because I can't unsee 24 when Jaden took a mediocre roster to the conference final, and hypothetically speaking, I believe the defense will keep the ball in Jaden's hands more to get the ball to Biami, McLaurin, and Chig. So I'm definitely taking Tunsil all day 6 days.
Look, I know what you're saying. You could say it
24.
both ways about 2024. He was so great that a mediocre pass catching unit was still good enough, but you'd have to also say a mediocre offensive line was elevated in 2024 as well. They didn't have Tunsil on that offensive line,
They
so
didn't.
there was
But-
that too.
But I also think too that Chig's run after the catch is going to be better than Ertz in terms of moving the chains. And I believe that defense is going to give Jaden more. And like you said, the coaches can work around not having Diggs, just like they can work around not having Tunsil.
Thank you, Rodney. If you could swap Diggs and bring back a healthy Tunsil, would you do it? Diggs ends up signing somewhere else, but we get Tunsil back healthy. Would you do it? 301-230-0980. Let's go to TC. TC, go ahead.
For taking my call. Kevin, I'm with you. I'm taking Diggs. Simple fact is that we had Coleman at the tackle, and Rookie came in there, and we went all the way to the NFC Championship. Okay, I understand that Tunsil is all pro and he's like that, but I'd rather have Diggs in there because I believe Diggs actually improves that wide receiver room better than that. Thinking that we can go back and have that wide receiver room perform and Terry's shoulder like we did in 24, I don't think that's going to happen again. That opens it up for Jaden a little bit. But my major concern is, that's a hypothetical, but my major concern, Kevin, is the center position because I'm not sure about Allegretti. I'm just not. I'm just not.
Well, who could be sure about Allegretti? None of us could be sure. We haven't seen it.
And
you got to go based on what they
issue.
think, and they could be wrong.
Right. That's what I'm saying. That's a major issue. So I'm hoping that they're gonna bring somebody in here, whatever the case may be, because we had Biash. He was pretty good that year. We went to the championship. So I don't get it. So it is what it is. But that's my major concern: the center position for the offensive line. And one other thing that I must mention is that the fact that we got to look out for our offensive coordinator because he put some stuff in. I know this was preseason. You had Chig out there trying to block the defensive end. That ain't gonna work. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work.
I mean, look, Bates really lost Wanham on that sack, but yeah, I think the safe answer here is Tunsil, but I think that actually an offensive coordinator in many ways can scheme up protection help by just play calling. Quick game nullifies pass rush. A run game obviously nullifies pass rush. RPO can really nullify pass rush. But if you don't have guys that can get open and there's only one guy that can get open and the other team knows that, then you need excessive time and you need look, you can scheme people open. There's no doubt. I just felt a month and a half ago, man, or a month ago before they signed Diggs, who is going to be the other guy that gets open other than a Okonkwo? And now I know that Diggs, one of the things he does, he gets open. Thank you, TC, for the call. Let's go to Bobby in North Carolina. Bobby's been on vacation all week enjoying himself. Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, it was a good trip. Hey, look, I'm keeping Diggs. I know games are won in the trenches, and this goes against what I believe, but I think Coleman is fine outside. He's proven he can play out there. He won't be a all-pro like Tunsil, but we had to have some help on that offensive side of the ball, especially in wide receiver room, and I think Diggs is going to be – people will see early and often what a big acquisition this was. So I'm with you. I'm taking Diggs, and he's going to make this offense potentially very explosive, Kevin, let me ask you a question. How concerned today, and I know we're, 17, 18 days away from playing, how concerned are you about the center position?
I'm very concerned. But if Allegretti makes it to the regular season healthy, then that's what they were planning on. He hasn't missed a regular season game yet, and none of us have any clue as to whether or not he can do it at the level that Biadasz did it. They believe he can, or Biadasz would still be here. hopefully healthy. He's not healthy. He's obviously out for the year after after tearing his ACL with the Chargers. Bad news for Justin Herbert and the Chargers again. But I'm concerned about his ability to stay healthy. I'm concerned about what they would do if he can't go. But I also expect them to do something about it between now and the opener, Bobby.
Exactly. And I'm fine with him playing it. I've got confidence in him. They evaluated that position in the offseason and thought they could let Bialic walk, and that's what they did. And I think Nick, like you said, he hadn't missed a game yet. Everybody's freaking out about the offensive line. Damn, we don't play until September 13th. People need to relax, man. Twitter is at an all-time cesspool the last few days. I mean, it's absolutely terrible, the things that I'm saying. People have no idea what they're talking about, and you got.
Well, that's never stopped anybody from being certain. I mean, don't let the facts get in the way of good stories. And there's no doubt. I had somebody because I went off yesterday just on the J.P. Finley asking the question that had to be asked of Jaden Daniels after the game.
Exactly.
And just the social media reaction. And I had somebody call me and tell me, look, it's bad here, and I've noticed it, but I follow this sort of stuff, and it's bad in a lot of spots. Social media has just allowed for so many people to present themselves as experts. Just like, by the way, I've been doing on radio for 22 years. All right? So it just allows almost anybody now to do it with by the way, gaining audiences for some unknown reason. I think though the conversation about the Jaden Daniels question from J.P. Finley is different than what you're talking about. But just the Sonny Styles, stuff is just absurd. Like, you want to say to some of these people, is this your first flight? Like, is this your first NFL preseason? Like, or your first NFL season in general? It's just there's a hysteria associated with preseason and training camp stuff that just doesn't make sense to me. And clearly the historical doesn't back up any reason to be hysterical. Although real things like signing Diggs and losing Tunsil, those are things to legitimately react and have opinions about. You'd go with Tunsil. I think most people would. Man, I think did you say you would stick with Diggs, right?
No. I want Diggs, bro.
Yeah, you want Diggs. You want Diggs. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm right. But Kevin, the only difference in your content over the last 25 years, your content is sensible contact. These people that are on Twitter, they don't have a clue what they're tweeting. It's just stupid stuff.
There's a lot of hypersensitivity, homerism. So that is where I've seen more of that in recent years. And been sort of exposed to that more in recent years. That is the most annoying, is the people that just literally they have dressed up in a jersey, a Commander's jersey with their name on the back of the jersey, and you're not allowed to be critical or to, God forbid, present any criticism or controversy to anybody involved. That's just that's so delicate, that's so orchid-like, and so small market, small town, that I think that drives me craziest the most. Thank you, Bobby.
I agree. Thank you.
Glad you had a good vacation. Kev in Arlington, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for taking my call. That whole bit about certainty kind of reminded me of something I learned in grad school from my econ professor. He had this wonderful expression. He said, about economists, right? Often wrong, never
in doubt. Right.
Yeah. Anyway, and this is a great hypothetical because I can see either side. But to me, the one thing that hasn't been mentioned is the sort of domino effect or the cascading effect. When you lose Tunsil, all of a sudden it jumbles what you were planning to do. I mean, I can go back to before free agency. I was convinced we'd have Biadasz, Coleman at left guard, and Tunsil left tackle. We're not going to have that. And maybe it won't matter, and maybe they'll be fine. But it's not only losing Tunsil, it's then, Paul he had 2 security blankets. He had
Yeah, no, you're right about that.
And he had Tunsil to his left. And then nobody's saying right now, oh boy, look how great Chris Paul looks. I mean, Dan had an opportunity to say that. What he said is Cosme looks good and Coleman looks good. So I don't know. To me, and just I don't want to be uncomfortable, but I just want to get a point across. I sent you in a text. What I'm having trouble with Adam is I get the sense there's this flat-footedness. He's looking for the best possible deal or whatever. And thank God they did ink Diggs, but we were all like going, what are you waiting for? And I've been feeling that way about left tackle depth and center depth. And what are we waiting for? I guess we're waiting for cut down day. And in the end, if it ends up being an acquisition, not that it's going to be Diggs-like, but if we get a credible NFL proven player to play center, and ideally someone to back up Coleman if he gets hurt, because I don't think Wiley's that or Trent Scott is that, then I'll be fine. But it's the injuries, they can blow up your whole
I think the left tackle thing I push back on. I think that they had a plan at left tackle, and it's Brandon Coleman. And that's a legitimate plan when you've got Laramie Tunsil and you're feeling comfortable about that. The center thing has absolute Monday morning quarterback written all over it. And we knew it from the jump because remember how surprised we are that they cut Biotish loose. Now, if they had signed Tyler Linderbaum in free agency, we wouldn't have given it a second thought, but they didn't.
Yep.
And so they're on plan B, and the plan B didn't come with legitimate competition for him. And I think that's part of the problem. Now, was there legitimate competition available? Maybe not in free agency, but perhaps in the draft before Gulbin in the 6th round. But there's some people actually, Kev, that think Gulbin actually has a chance. But it would be awfully dicey if that chance comes in the opener against Carter and Davis at the link. We wouldn't want to see that.
No, we wouldn't. So we'll just have to see how it unfolds. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, as always. Let's go to Athen. Athen, finish it up for us. Simply put, if you could swap Diggs for Tunsil, would you?
No, I wouldn't, because the games are won in trenches, and you don't mess with your offensive line, especially at least.
So you would. You would you would take the swap and bring Tunsil back.
Yeah, to bring Tunsil back, because you don't mess with a quarterback who, at least for last year, had durability issues. Now, I think that a lot of that was the play calling and the lack of talent around him, so he has a lot to prove that year. But you have to also remember, there's preliminary, at least rumblings online, that McLaurin, we don't want to cut Jefferson. We got Diami, this kid Bradley, and the kid Williams, that we could have trade talks with someone like Luke McCaffrey to get another offensive lineman in here. So, I mean, if we're that good at receiver,
we could be overrating the ability to move one of these players, but they did move Brian Robinson Jr., and teams get desperate, and some of these receivers might be attractive, but not as, you're not bringing back a starting center for one of these receivers.
Right. I'm on the side of Doc Walker. Is you when you can move another man beyond his will, that's how you win the game. So
right, yeah, I'm with him too. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, couple of things to finish up on. We'll get to those next. Last night in the WNBA, Angel Reese, who plays for the Atlanta Dream, she had an unbelievable WNBA record, 26 rebounds in one game. It's a 40-minute game. It's not 48. 26 rebounds in 40 minutes for Angel Reese. She surpassed Shamika Holdsclaw's record, WNBA record, that had stood for 23 seasons. Holdsclaw had 24 rebounds back in 2003 when she was playing for the Washington Mystics. On top of that, Angel Reese now has 458 rebounds in just 37 games this season, 7 more than Asia Wilson's mark set in 2024. At 451 rebounds. I was looking to see how many of those were kind of Moses Malone style. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Moses Malone would miss a lot of shots around the rim but get offensive rebounds, and those rebound totals would jump up. Of the 26 rebounds, 8 were offensive rebounds. She was 4 of 14 from the floor and scored just 11 points. But that actually came after she scored 31 points, which was a career high the night before, or 2 nights before, in a game in which she had 14 rebounds. 26 rebounds is a lot. And Caitlin Clark the other night became, or ended up having, her second 35-plus, 10-plus game of her WNBA career. That was on Sunday night. She went for 37 and 10. In the history of the league, there have only been 2, 35 or more, 10 assists or more. She also, by the way, became the first player to have 5 30-plus games with 10-plus assists. The history of the league's produced only 4 prior to her getting 5 in her first 3 seasons. Those 2 players who had that, incredible back-and-forth rivalry, Iowa-LSU, Iowa-Maryland before that, because that's where Angel Reese started, was at Maryland. They've turned out to be pretty damn good players at the WNBA level. All right. You said that you wanted me to mention something else. What was the other thing you wanted me to mention?
I mean, the Daquan Wright thing with the Big Ten putting out their statement saying that they're not going to allow any former NFL players in their ranks.
Right. Daquan Wright from the Cleveland roster to LSU's roster. Xavier Harris from New Orleans, the Saints roster to LSU's roster. And the Big Ten did pass a rule today, according to ESPN's Pete Thamel, where they will not sign any players that have played professional football. Remember, you can't sign players from the NFL that are under contract. Daquan Wright was released. So there will be more of those coming Sunday post 6 p.m., the deadline where players get released. But if you've got a contract with an NFL team, even if it looks like you might be released, you can't do it now. You can't sign a contract. Wright was actually legitimately released by the Browns. The Big Ten's not going to do it. The SEC could have easily also implemented a rule saying that they aren't going to do it, but they haven't done that yet.
They put out a statement last night, which is what the SEC is very good at doing. Yes, it did say
I read
nothing.
that statement. It basically didn't definitively create a policy. They need to create a policy about not signing players that have played professional sports. By the way, Will Wade, who's back at LSU, cheater, is also signing players that have played professional, because this started with college basketball last year having that open window to go sign players that had played in the G League or internationally. College sports, still great, though, when the games are going on. I'm off for a few days. Chris Russell's next.